Welcome to Everything Casual, bringing you original football casual videos from the golden era of the 80s and 90s, right up to current day. Football away day stories and historic clashes between football firms. Subscribe so you don't miss out. We upload videos every week.
Organised football violence arrived late in the Shropshire market town. There had been the odd outburst of disorder dating back to the late 60s, but it was essentially random. In March 1966, Shrewsbury Town were instructed by the FA to print a warning to spectators in their programme, following a home game against Accrington. Bournemouth fans were seen as a group who were intent on causing a confrontation after a couple of young men were arrested. The notice warned fans of serious consequences if there was a repeat of the trouble. 3 years later, in March 1969, Shrewsbury Town fans were once again in the national news after a referee was struck by a youth during a game. There were few reports of trouble at matches in the 70s as the team languished in the 4th Division. Shrewsbury was rightly considered a nice, friendly family club in a small and relatively prosperous market town. While there was trouble at an FA Cup tie against Aldershot in February 1979, it was the defeat of Manchester City in the following round, in front of a record 16,000 crowd, which drew the attention of the national press. This was followed 2 years later with the dispatch of in-form Ipswich, who were then riding high in Division 1. In many other towns, such high-profile scalps would have been followed by mass disorder from losing fans and locals keen to impress. This was not the case with the boys of the Gay Meadow, as more football news reports, especially on the radio, was almost always accompanied by a mention of Derbyshire, the ageing gang who would be dispatched in his coracle to fetch full of fare. It was kicked over the stand and into the river. He eventually retired in the 90s, but was forced to return at the age of 75 after his son proved ineffective at reaching the ball before it got away by the current. The Gay Meadow is perhaps the most precariously on the edge of the River Severn, so making it prone to regular flooding. Between it and the English Bridge, one of 7 bridges circling the small town centre, was Wildman School, which during its middle to late 80s would transform itself into a police car park on match days for what regularly appeared as a centre for a fan base so small. The English Bridge once reflected an important psychological underpinning of the town, as less than half a mile away was the Welsh Bridge. Shrewsbury was the medieval route to Wales, and the town had that border mentality. It is said that a medieval law still exists, which allows for the shooting of Welshmen within the town walls by a crossbow after dark. When the football casual movement finally caught on in the town in the mid-80s. The name English Border Front was adopted by Shrewsbury's soccer gang. Perhaps one reason why hooliganism was so late in arriving was because the fan base did not lend itself to mass disorder. Most of its fans appeared to be older men, or so it appeared to the small groups of teenagers who would gather at the back of the riverside stand, along with a small hardcore of older lads who were in no way interested in the fashion of the 80s. There was little atmosphere inside the ground, though racist chanting of "nigger, nigger, lick my boot" was regularly sung at black players of opposing teams. Many of the lads in the town would support bigger clubs, particularly Leeds, Manchester United, Liverpool and Aston Villa. Few young people would follow Shrewsbury regularly, and fighting was more normally associated with late-night drinking and pre-arranged inter-school scraps on Friday nights. Promotion into the 2nd Division in May 1979 with a 4-1 home win over Exeter brought new challenges to the small club and historical town. Early in the following season, Shrewsbury played host to Chelsea, the first major team to play at the Gay Meadow. A crowd of 10,000 was expected to watch the match, but for the police and many local businesses, it was the 1,000 travelling fans which were a cause for concern. In the days leading up to the game, there was growing anxiety about potential disorder. An An elaborate police operation swung into action this afternoon to foil the threat of soccer violence as Shrewsbury faced an invasion of Chelsea fans who have a notorious reputation for trouble, reported the Shropshire Star. Many publicans, anticipating trouble, were keeping their doors closed until the match. British Transport Police had extra men on duty at the station and officers aboard the train. From the station, the fans were ushered aboard waiting coaches and driven to the Gay Meadow car park, where the other visiting coaches were directed to unload. At both points there was a heavy police presence. The police operation was made all the more complicated because of a dispute over the funding of a short line from the main station to close to the football ground. As an alternative, the police had to organise coaches to ferry those fans arriving by train the mile or so to the ground, rather than allowing them to wander through the shopping streets. The greatest preparations do not always go to plan, as Shrewsbury was left counting the cost of its worst day of soccer violence in its history. Over 60 arrests were made as hundreds of Chelsea fans ran amok through the town after watching their side lose 3-0. A local publican described a mob of between 500 to 700 fans as, like a tidal wave, an army gone mad. Windows of shops and houses were smashed, car windscreens shattered, and a do-it-yourself warehouse invaded until the arrival of police reinforcements, reported the next edition of the local paper. 15 arrests were made inside the ground, mostly when police broke up fighting between Chelsea fans and Shrewsbury supporters after some Londoners sneaked into the home terraces. The system began to go wrong, however, at the final whistle. Chelsea fans, incensed at their team's 3-0 defeat, tried to get through the police cordon and reach Shrewsbury supporters pouring out of the other gate. They were foiled by a massive police presence. Refusing to board the special coach to take them back to the station, several hundred broke away and ran down the railway embankment towards the station. Worse was to come. The Chelsea fans had begun to travel home, but one died after apparently falling from a train in Buckinghamshire. 20-year-old Terry Burke from Walworth, London, was on the Wolverhampton to London train at the time. A victim of the violence was local lad Ian Turner, who was attacked by Chelsea fans as he was making his way home from a nightclub at 2 a.m. on the Sunday morning. One pulled me down and pulled my shirt off and started scratching me. I was shouting for help, but no one came. A picture of his injuries, which included over 30 long cuts, adorned the front page of the Shropshire Star. The first of those arrested began appearing in front of local magistrates on the Monday morning. Robin Onions, prosecuting, told magistrates how between 500 and 700 fans kicked and broke windscreens of cars. He added that one officer, out of the 250 on duty, thought his time was up when the Panda car in which he was sitting was overturned. Over 200 Chelsea fans got into Shrewsbury's Riverside End, and within 2 minutes of the start of the game, fighting broke out. The trouble was enough to prompt one of the M&I Onions explain that few of those involved took any interest in the football. He described the surge through police lines after the game as a cattle stampede out of a Wild West film. Chelsea came over as they always did at the smaller places and took over the town, remembered one current EBF follower. Shrewsbury got a decent account of themselves, though the talk was all about this bunch of cockneys dressed in outrageous carrying trolleys. They got in at the Riverside End and had gone number in there, but Shrewsbury still knew it was an Allied day and most of the night, but they never got the chance to get involved. They were coming up short. Several of the Chelsea contingent received jail terms. 3 seasons later, there was further serious disorder after the visit of Birmingham City, any game involving the bigger Midlands clubs growing headaches for the police. Birmingham Wolves and West Brom would regularly big firms and fight. Another game during this period which saw trouble was the home match against Manchester City in November 1983. It was very much the same as the Chelsea game. They came in massive numbers, but faced resistance that they thought we never had. But there was no way the Shrewsbury lads could match Derby County in May 1984 for a match that saw their Midlands rivals relegated to the 3rd Division. 3,000 Derby fans made the journey, and there was chaos during and after the game. The Derby lunatic fringe calling cards that were littered around town proved too attractive to be overlooked, and this one game appeared to be the catalyst for the emergence of a Shrewsbury casual mob. By the time of a pre-season friendly game at Hereford United a few months later, the Shrewsbury lads had gathered themselves together into the soon-to-be-named English border front. Almost 200 Shrewsbury lads made the short trip to Hereford by train and spent much of the time walking around town, enjoying the fear they evoked in the locals. It was a power thing, remembered one. Most of us were teenagers, with only a few older lads there. You could see shoppers fleeing to escape our path. It made us feel more powerful than we probably were. There was a real buzz. One of the early Shrewsbury leaders, DM, was then just 18, the son of a former school teacher. He loved football violence and soon began running with bigger mobs, particularly in London. A year or so after the EBF was formed, a firm from nearby Telford came into town unannounced on a summer Saturday afternoon. DM quickly organised a mob, and by the time the fighting had been brought under control, more than 20 people had been arrested. A court was specially adapted, so the Shrewsbury defendants, led by DM, sat on one side of the room with Telford on the other. The majority were found guilty, with many being sent to youth detention. DM, meanwhile, was also beginning to earn a name following England and became close friends with former Chelsea leaders Steve Hickmott and Chris Henderson. Telford were Shrewsbury's closest rivals, though their non-league status meant meetings were consigned to the Shropshire Cup. A final held in Telford in the late 80s proved to be a torrid affair for the few EBF who made the trip, as hundreds of the so-called Telford Youth Organisation gathered outside the ground at the final whistle in the hope of getting to the travelling supporters. Some unfortunate Shrewsbury fans were forced to run for their lives in the face of overwhelming numbers. Perhaps as a way of alleviating the humiliation, many EBF lads later claimed that the Telford ranks had been swelled by Wolves and Birmingham lads, many of whom lived in the new town. The EBF was not able to cope with many rival mobs who visited during the club's time in the 2nd Division. Chelsea, Leeds, Manchester City, Stoke and Birmingham were all regular visitors to the Gay Meadow, and these clubs would travel over in the thousands, bringing hundreds of hooligans. In 1986, Shrewsbury hosted Middlesbrough, as they had done for the final game of the 1985 season, and while the previous year the visitors secured the necessary points to stay up, this time a 2-1 defeat led to widespread disorder still talked about by Borough fans. Later that year, it was the turn of West Brom fans to cause trouble when they clashed with police, leaving several injured and arrested. The following year saw Cardiff City fans rampage through town after a last-minute goal dumped the Welsh team out of the Littlewoods Cup. Regardless of the numbers some of the so-called main firms were bringing, the EBF were getting stronger and always offered some resistance. It was around this time their biggest turnout was mobilised, 200 for a match in Blackpool. Shrewsbury's key rivals have long been Wrexham, though a founding member of the EBF once lived in the Welsh town and ran with the Frontline gang. There have been a number of serious clashes between the two groups over the years, most of them in Shrewsbury. In the summer of 1987, a coachload of Wrexham fans descended on the town one Saturday evening, and before the night was out, they were involved in running clashes with hundreds of locals. 37 Wrexham youths were arrested and 6 policemen hurt, reported one newspaper. 5 officers were taken to hospital with severely irritated eyes, ears and noses after what is believed to be CS gas was thrown. Fighting broke out at about 2 a.m. last Saturday as a group of Wrexham youths on a stag night clashed with Shrewsbury youths as they left the Park Lane nightclub. A senior police officer estimated that up to 500 youths were involved in running street battles, and a black Ford Fiesta car was badly damaged through the rioting crowds. Tit-for-tat fighting became a feature of their rivalry. We stopped at Wrexham after going to Chester or Tranmere, recalled Ryan, a leading figure in the EBF. On other occasions, the EBF merely enjoyed going for Welsh targets. The main one was when the EBF went to a rave in Bangor mob-handed and it kicked off all night. It was Wrexham, though, who remained top of the hit list, and although two of the main lads from the front line and EBF are good mates, the friendship stops on match days. Ask him about 1992, laughed Ryan. They came mob-handed and got more than they bargained for. We chased them all over town, and I think he still has some scars from that day. They brought 100 on the train and fronted the castle. The landlord had bolted all the doors, and we could not get out straight away. But once we were out into them, they tried to stand, but soon crumbled. See Wrexham. I respect them because they always come, but they believe their own hype and claim some ridiculous results. The time 5 of them attacked the Elephant and Castle with iron bars and cleared the beer garden full of lads is a funny one. They deserve credit for running in and calling it on, as they never had any idea how many lads were in there. But they were lucky as it was about 10. The result they had was fucking up a few cosy couples' evening. They must have shit themselves when 5 Welsh warriors ran in swinging bats shouting "front line." They hit a few and were chased out. One lad was pleading for protection from the police. It was a hit and run attack, and they ran all right. We took 4 coaches to Wrexham for one game, but the police had us parked up before the pubs were open and in the ground before the fucking groundsman had finished marking the pitch. Despite the different views as to the outcome of many of the clashes between Wrexham and Shrewsbury, they do agree on one thing. Chester are not in the same league as either the EBF or the front line. They claim some big result at our place one year, sneered Ryan. Well, nobody down here can remember it, but just to even things out, we took a full complement up there, and they ended up barricading themselves in the Queen Victoria when we tried to force our way in. I don't agree with much the Vic one from Wrexham. Frontline leader Neil Williams says, but I know he is right when he says Chester are not worth a mention. Any match involving Wrexham and Shrewsbury was heavily policed. The two sides played at the Gay Meadow on the 2nd of January 1993. And though there were some serious fights, the police felt that their operation went a long way to prevent more widespread disorder. A total of 120 officers were on duty for a game, which only attracted a gate of a few thousand, and 7 people, including 6 from Shrewsbury, were arrested. The 1987 season saw clashes during Shrewsbury's away game with Aston Villa. We did them in the Vines pub, boasted Ryan. The fight hit the national newspapers when 69 Shrewsbury fans were arrested by police after 2 young brothers were attacked as they sat at a bus stop on the EBF's route to the ground. The Whitton Arms also saw trouble break out, and that day it was 50-odd either side, and we came out on top, said Ryan. Another game that witnessed considerable violence was the opening game of the 1990 season, when Shrewsbury were host to Bolton Wanderers, one of the biggest hooligan mobs in the lower divisions at the time. Business as usual, said Ryan. They brought a good firm, 100 plus, and as they were escorted from the station, we charged out of the Rock and Fountain pub and backed them onto the station. They thought it would be a stroll in the park, like many others, but it wasn't. 1990 proved to be a significant year in the history of the EBF, the first time that a large mob of Shrewsbury hooligans travelled abroad together for an England game. It set a precedent for future international tournaments. Several Shrewsbury hooligans were arrested and deported from Italy, particularly after being involved in fighting in Rimini. Over the next few years, Shrewsbury were to earn a surprising reputation as one of the largest firms on the England scene, to the extent that 90 lads went on one trip. In 1993, according to the Guardian newspaper, 47 Shrewsbury-based men were deported from Holland in one day during the failed World Cup qualifier in Holland. In the early days, firms used to come to Shrewsbury and call us Welsh bastards, and we decided to make a point of going to England games to prove how patriotic we are to our country, said Ryan. We started off by taking small groups, but soon were taking 50 or 60 and have taken 90 abroad. Like the papers say, 50-odd Shrewsbury were deported after one game in Holland, but what they didn't report was that a few flew straight back out there the next day. It was at the World Cup in Italy that the EBF established links with both Oldham and Newcastle United, and this close friendship lasts to this day. The Oldham-Shrewsbury link is especially strong, and they have regularly been to each other's key games. We all met at Italia 90, said Ryan. We got hanged up with a load of Newcastle when the police rounded everyone up one night. We met Oldham at the same place and made friends with them after we bought acid tabs off them. It is the kind of thing you do on England duty, and one reason why we can never remember half the fucking goings on. We have been to Newcastle for some big games, Sunderland, Stoke and Borough, to name a few. We were at Stoke for one big battle in the Coca-Cola Cup. We're at Wrexham and Leeds when Oldham did both the Welsh lot and the Four Dogs pub and the service crew at the Viaduct pub a few years ago. We have been to Oldham, Spurs home and away, and they have come down to us a few times. No major numbers on either side. But good lads from all those mobs have swelled the ranks for key games, and we have great respect for each other. Prior to the 1992 European Championships in Sweden, Shrewsbury and Telford hooligans battled on a ferry, causing the captain to turn the boat around and call the police, whilst the Shrewsbury, Oldham and Newcastle axis saw a united mob of almost 200 lads travel to the 1993 match in Holland. Even for the World Cup match against Wales in Manchester in 2004, the Shrewsbury, Oldham and Stockport group numbered over 100. Shrewsbury's linking with Newcastle United is described in Stoke Hooligan, Mark Chester's Naughty, though the EBF is dismissed in derogatory terms. An equally scathing account of the Shrewsbury link with Oldham is made in the Wrexham section of this book. It is not just the Stoke football mob the EBF have clashed with. For several weeks they fought battles with a group of Stoke bouncers who tried their hand at running the doors in Shrewsbury. Similar to some of the football firms who come here and think they can take the piss, these meatheads turned up one night, dressed like Max and Paddy, and started larging it on the door of the Paradise Boozer. One lad went in with his missus, and they ended up slinging him out over a nothing incident, so he lamps one of them, and they kick fuck out of him. We heard about it, went around and demolished them the same night. The following week, they turned up with 15 men, and it was the same outcome. We battered them and then gassed the pub for good measure. This went on for a few weeks. It was bedlam. They kept increasing their firm numbers, and we kept turning up and smashing them. There was no cunt left in the pub. It was just full of bouncers. One night, the place got badly damaged in the fight, and the landlord had the tape, so we agreed to stop going there if he fucked the bouncers off. It was all over the papers and on Central TV madness, all because of a few pricks who probably could not handle the doors in Stoke and thought they could earn some easy money. Away from the troubles in town, another trip abroad saw several Shrewsbury hooligans arrested and charged after a violent clash with North Africans in Berlin as they were making their way overland to Poland. We had it with a load of ethnics over a row about drugs. In minutes, every African, Moroccan, Turk, or whatever they were attacked with, big kebab knives and pizza cutters. We were with some Newcastle and Oldham lads, and it was nasty. 60 of us were fighting for 5 lives, and one of the locals lost one eye and his other was half blind after a glass went into his face. Some of our mob were stabbed, 5 EBF and 2 Newcastle. One of our lads spent a year in jail over it. They tried to deport us all, but never pulled it off. By the early 90s, the EBF was widely known on the rave and drug scene. They would regularly travel as a mob to raves in Stoke, Wales, and across the West Midlands, where sometimes they would do business with hooligans from rival firms, but on other occasions there would be fights. Several EBF hooligans were also long-term residents in Ibiza, with as many as 20 joining them at the height of summer. It was like walking down Pride Hill. One Shrewsbury lad, not a hooligan, remarked after a trip to the Spanish resort in the early 90s. The police also took a close interest in the Shropshire mob because of their drug-dealing activities. They were in and out of my hall 24 hours a night. One former NCIS officer commented, "The West Midlands Serious Crime Squad in the late 90s ran 3 informants inside the EBF, with their interest being drugs and other criminal-related offences rather than football. Several EBF followers were to be imprisoned around the country for drugs offences, including one who, in the mid-1990s, was sentenced to almost 4 years after he was caught near Heathrow Airport in possession of 43 kilos of cannabis. Their drug links also drew the attention of television's The Cook Report, which in 1996 attempted to place an undercover operative close to the mob's leader. Fortunately for the hooligans, the undercover man, a former soldier with 12 years service with the SAS and 14th Intelligence Company, a special undercover unit in Northern Ireland, was unsuccessful in convincing the role. He was simply too big and way too hard to have any plausible reason for interest in the Shrewsbury gang. The EBF smelt a rat, and together with a local radio station, who they had alerted believing they were the target of a flawed police operation, went to a meeting with the undercover man wired up and in the company of at least one reporter. Unfortunately for the hooligans, the Cook Report had been doing extensive surveillance on them and learnt of this. So when the former SAS soldier went into the pub, accompanied by another ex-Special Forces operative who was also a martial arts world champion, they knew they had to close the story before the station went public. They were immediately suspicious of a plaster cast on the arm of the EBF leader, which they thought might conceal a recording device. To the man's horror, they ordered him outside. He resisted, but was given little alternative. While the second soldier stayed in the pub glaring at the others, the EBF man was marched outside, where he was searched, and sure enough, a microphone was found hidden in his cast. He was told, in no uncertain terms, that it was in his best interests not to tell all. This was an audit on a video camera, hidden in the soldier's jacket. The programme came to nothing, but to the Shrewsbury reporter's knowledge. The EBF kept quiet about events. Drugs, mainly heroin, had a huge impact on the Shrewsbury mob in this period. Like most firms, drugs hit us badly, and apart from the rave scene, we have lost about 10 lads over the years to overdoses on hard drugs, said Ryan. All soccer crews have what they call bad days at the office, and the EBF are no different. When questioned on their worst day ever, Ryan asked for a pause and joked that he would need another drink before he could carry on. 5 minutes later, he blurted out, "Swansea City away." He then reluctantly went into detail about the worst day of his life. It was horrible. One of those days when everyone is supposedly coming and there is talk of 150 getting the train, and the reality when you get on the feeder, that is about 120 of them have conveniently missed it. We went anyway and could not believe how easy it was when we got there. We went in the pub that was supposed to be their main meeting place. We wandered around the town and were dropping our calling cards everywhere. Total walkover. As we got up by the ground, we saw one lad sitting on a wall and he jumped down and ran at us. It was unbelievable. We were looking at each other thinking, who the fuck is this nuisance? When all of a sudden 200 of them were all around us at a T-junction and they kicked the shit out of us. We were running everywhere, and once by the turnstiles we were just jumping in to get away. I went straight over, me and a mate were covered in blood, and before we could get ourselves sorted, they were into us again. We had jumped into their fucking end. We were battered onto the pitch. On the way home, every single one of us had bandages or plasters or stitches, and although we laugh about it now, it was one scary day. They turned up at our place with 200, and although it pains me to say it, we rate them as good as anyone. It was during the early to mid-90s that Shrewsbury began a rivalry with Millwall, surprising given the differences between the two mobs. It was all to do with them calling it on with a small mob of Shrewsbury after they played at our place, said Ryan. We walked past a pub and half a dozen went in, and 10 main Millwall lads were in there who attacked the Shrewsbury lads. What they never knew was what we had outside, and we battered them. It was their call. We had no intention of going into them until they started. We know we could not match them firm on firm. Who can? But that day, they called it on and were sorry. There were threats made for months after that they were going to do this and that, but nothing came of it. A long-standing rivalry has been with Mansfield town, and over the years, the EBF have had more clashes with them than any other team, save for perhaps Wrexham. Where do you start? Pondered the EBF lad. In pre-mobile phone years, there were some great battles with them. We bumped into them late one night after they came to us. They attacked our mob in the Elephant and Castle pub, and there were a lot of injuries on both sides, but as a result, both firms respected each other. We would take 70-80 there and have it. The following season they would do the same, great battles. One paper reported that one clash was the first time CS gas had been used at a match. The best fight was on the way home from Wembley after England had played Holland. We were on a coach on the motorway and we overtook a coach full of their lads. You know what it's like when one bus overtakes the other. It takes 5 minutes to pass, and after about a minute it was like, who are those cunts? And you can see them doing the same. Next minute we're both telling the driver to stop in the middle of the motorway, but luckily there was a service station near, so we both pulled in and it went off. Mental 5 minutes. We chased them into the services and they came flying out with a load of workmen's tools, wood and metal poles. The services were being rebuilt and there was gear all over the place. We backed off, but there was a skip full of old bits of metal and wood from the demolished cafe, so we got that and chased them back in. It was like a carry-on film, absolutely crazy. The police turned up and we got back on the buses and went home, no one nicked. Quality day. In April 1996, Shrewsbury Town made their one and so far only visit to Wembley, this for the final of the Auto Windscreens Trophy. They lost 2-1 to Rotherham United in an awful display from the Shrewsbury team in front of 16,000 of their supporters. For the EBF, it was more than a cup final. It was a grudge match between two firms with a history. We played them a couple of years before at their place and went there 40-handed. We were in a pub called the Turf, but the police had it surrounded and all the intelligence officers were there and everything that comes with them. The next minute, a mob of lads come down the stairs into the pub and call it on, so we slaughtered them. We thought they would all be nicked, but the police just let us get on with it. It was definitely a setup, and when we paid out, they were all there, and our spotter was clapping us. He told one lad that he had a £10 bet with their spotter that we would do Rotherham. The pub had cameras up, but the landlord had not turned them on, and only 2 lads were ever nicked. The night before the final, about 15 of us were wandering about King's Cross after coming out of some club, and we bumped into a mob of them and it went off. We chased them down the road and they called a load of lads out of the B&B where they were staying, and we smashed them, and the B&B up even chased them. In the end, the owner came out in his slippers, pleading with us to stop and leave them, and his scruffy B&B alone. Shrewsbury Town's playing fortunes were taking a nosedive. After almost a decade in Division 2, the team slipped first into Division 3 and then into Division 4 shortly after. Even there they struggled, and in May 2000, the team travelled to Exeter for the final match of the season, with relegation a serious prospect. The 1,500 allocation for the away end was quickly snapped up, and a mob of the EBF travelled to Torquay the evening before. Fighting broke out with locals, and 9 people were arrested, including 6 from Shrewsbury. On the pitch, a 2-0 win secured town survival at the expense of Barnet, who slipped into the conference. It was only to be a short reprieve, as 3 seasons later, Shrewsbury finally dropped out of the Football League. There have been many key final Saturdays of the season for Shrewsbury, especially at home. During the mid-80s there were home matches against Derby and Middlesbrough, twice, in consecutive seasons where the opposing team arrived facing the drop. 3 crunch matches were accompanied by some of the worst trouble Shrewsbury has seen. In the early 90s, Shrewsbury's home game against Northampton Town saw the East Midlands team secure promotion, and again there was widespread disorder. In May 2001, Brighton celebrated promotion with a game at the Gay Meadow. The National Criminal Intelligence Service recorded what happened. Before the game, a group of 25 Brighton supporters were sighted outside a public house frequented by Shrewsbury fans. There was then an exchange of missiles which was quickly dealt with by police. Close to kick-off, a small group of Brighton supporters were attacked near the stadium by a larger group of locals. 2 arrests, 1 from each side, were made, and a 4-year-old girl was knocked over, receiving facial injuries. At the end of the game, there was a small pitch invasion, said the NCIS report. After the match, there were several outbreaks of fighting in the town centre on the way back to the railway station. Police used batons in an attempt to separate the groups. A shop was damaged, and missiles were exchanged throughout. Brighton supporters were escorted to Birmingham by BTP, British Transport Police, and then onwards to Brighton. There were 10 arrests, 5 from Shrewsbury and 1 from Brighton. In May 2003, Shrewsbury had already been relegated to the conference when they welcomed Scunthorpe United for their final home game. The police were on high alert as the East Coast team were chasing promotion, and intelligence suggested that both mobs would be well represented. More than 100 officers were drafted in, as Detective Inspector Martin Whitelegger of Shrewsbury Police said he had reason to believe there may be trouble. Because it is the last league game that Shrewsbury may see for some time, large numbers may turn up to see that little bit of history being made, he said. Scunthorpe are at the other end of the table, and our intelligence is that they will have quite a large following. That always brings an element of problems. 1 or 2 individuals will come here intent on causing problems rather than to watch the football. In the event, there were only minor scuffles. Football hooligan websites were now buzzing with the news that Shrewsbury were in the conference. While hardly a super firm, the EBF was still a recognised gang with a reputation on the England scene. For the likes of Aldershot, Hereford, and of course, local rivals Telford, it would be an eagerly awaited fixture. Early in the new season, Shrewsbury played at Aldershot, and there was 5 arrests as gangs met in the street after the game. Police drew batons and had to use CS gas to disperse the crowds, noted one media report. It is thought the trouble may have been prearranged by hooligans attaching themselves to each of the clubs. Trouble broke out involving 50 or so people in gangs outside a pub in Aldershot following Saturday's game, which ended in a 1-1 draw. More arrests could follow. 2 months later, Shrewsbury saw a large police operation for the arrival of Hereford United. Over 100 police were on duty, a significant amount in any context, but remarkable for a conference fixture. Police were stationed on the A49 to monitor traffic for the arrival of the Hereford mob. Come to Shrewsbury, enjoy the football, but if you cause trouble, you will be locked up, warned Detective Chief Inspector Martin Whiteleg prior to the game, which was expected to be an 8,000 sellout. Both clubs have some history of disorder. We're putting other measures in place to prevent people coming into Shrewsbury on that day. If they are intent on travelling, we'll legitimately be able to detain them. Whiteleg said there were people from both towns who loosely associated themselves with football as an excuse for violence. It isn't a spontaneous thing, he said. It's pre-planned disorder. Our job is to make sure the genuine supporters can enjoy Shrewsbury. The heavy policing appeared to work, and there was little trouble reported in the press. Whiteleg was in danger of sounding like a scratched record when, in late February 2004, he was warning fans over their behaviour at the FA Trophy clash between Shrewsbury and Telford. Overseeing the £45,000 police operation, which included a noon kick-off, he advised, "Come to Shrewsbury and enjoy the football match, but if you come here intent on causing problems, there will be a robust police operation and you will be arrested and dealt with." West Mercia's tough policing policy might have been proving effective, but it was costly, and for local rivals, Telford, it was simply too expensive. The club balked at the £11,000 bill the police gave them for Shrewsbury's visit to the Buck's Head in early April. Already facing a police bill of £36,000, the club's directors were described as terrified at the latest operation. But the police were unapologetic, saying that while they sympathised with the club's plight, they had a duty to spend public money in a responsible manner. Local residents and traders were fully behind the police, especially as the FA Trophy game between the two, held only a few weeks before, ended with running battles and riot police in Wellington. 7 people were arrested and considerable damage was caused to the Oddfellows Arms, with windows smashed and the curtains set alight. 5 pubs decided to close their doors for the match in case of a repeat. There is no point making a bit of extra cash over the till if you end up having to pay for damage caused by hooligans, said one landlord. Shrewsbury's hooligans have found it increasingly difficult to operate due to strong police action and the imposition of football bans. At the time of the 2004 European Championships, 20 Shrewsbury fans were banned from the ground, though this dropped the following year. The EBF also suffered from being closely monitored by the police. A recent attempt to book a coach from some distance outside Shrewsbury on the basis of going to a wedding did little to fool the police, who were waiting for them at their destination. Shrewsbury lasted 1 season in the conference before a playoff victory against Hereford at Stokes Britannia Stadium saw them back in the Football League, with a potentially explosive opening fixture at home to Lincoln City, a club with the worst hooligan record in the league at that time. However, another big police operation prevented trouble, and Chief Inspector Whiteleg must have been delighted to tell the press how successful the operation was, and his officers had combined monitoring the location of the Shrewsbury hooligans with tracking a group of 40 to 50 Lincoln and ensuring the two did not meet. In another move to tighten the screw on the EBF, the police and club announced a new initiative in December 2004 to ban suspected hooligans from the Gay Meadow for 5 years. Police gave the club a list of 30 names who were then immediately banned, with the promise of more to come. The news came after 16 people were thrown out of the ground and 3 arrests were made during Shrewsbury's game with Swansea City. Life has certainly become more difficult for the EBF, and Ryan admits this. Including club and civil bans, we have over 40 lads who are very active, no longer allowed to participate, he said. That's half our firm. The bigger firms have 40 banned and it does not affect them that. You can now find us on Facebook, where we are building up a nice, like-minded community. Just type in Everything Casual on Facebook and our page will pop up. Feel free to message me on there if you have any good stories or suggestions for a future video. Thank you to everyone that has sent me stories, videos and pictures. I will be using them soon. And thank you to everyone that has taken the time to watch this video. Give us a like and subscribe if you are a fan of the football casual culture. See you next time.